Hey everyone, it's Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make deep micro house like Toman. I'm going to be going in and showing you guys some new techniques I picked up on, new things that I haven't shown you guys in these videos before. And yeah, as usual, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video. It's available right at the top of the description, and yeah, let's get started. Alright, so this is the project file. We're at 127 BPM, it's a little bit faster with this micro house type of stuff, that kind of like faster, more garagey, like upbeat feel works really well. And the first sound here is the kick. So as you can hear, the kick is pretty simple, it's just this big fat kick. If you look at the waveform, you can see, it's super boomy. The main thing here is just the type of kick you want. So you want one of these very fat, punchy, quick sort of kicks like this. That's still going to have a lot of boom to it. And really, what I recommend looking at, because part of this at least, in terms of the layering, is the 909 kick. Definitely look at the 909 drum machine and the kicks from there, because a lot of these kicks are 909 kicks, but with either some extra layers attached, or just with a lot of fattening, like saturation and stuff like that. So it's definitely a good starting source for these types of kicks. And then I just have a bit of saturation on that one. And then we have the bassline, which is actually made up of 2 layers, and it sounds like this. So as you can hear, the 2 different layers of bass here are sort of talking to each other. The idea is that you have call and response, because you have this one, which almost feels like it's a bit higher. Because it's a bit brighter and it's got more mid-range to it. And then then the response would be this super low and deep one. So yeah, because with this style, as you can see here, most of what's happening in this track is what we would refer to as the rhythm section, like the bass, the kick, all the percussion and hi-hats and stuff. It's really mostly those elements, and then the different things like the chords and melodies and stuff like that are really sort of extra garnishes for that. Because of this, we want a very interesting dynamic with our bass lines. So having the 2 bass lines sort of talking to each other can work really well for that. And the interesting thing here too is that it's really not that many notes. If you look at this bass line, you can see we just have 2 notes, because it's just D across 3 different octaves, and then F. And then if we look at the second bass line here, it's just 2 notes as well. So it's really 3 notes total, just D, F, and G. But with those 3 notes going across these 2 different layers, we're able to make a very interesting and dynamic bass line. When you hear that in the full track, you may not even notice it, especially if you're just a casual listener. But I guarantee you, if you try to take this out and replace it with just a bassline loop from a sample pack, it's not really going to be the same thing. So for the first bass layer, it's made with operator, and all this is actually it's just a square wave, and then that's just going into a low pass filter. So without the low pass, and then with it, and you can see the low pass has an envelope on it as well. It's just that quick, plucky sort of thing happening there. And then we just have a bit of drum bus to fatten that up a little bit, and then we have a compressor side chaining into the kick, and then we just have this EQ8 here, which is just cutting out a bit of room at 100 hertz. Makes a little bit of room for the kick. And that's it for the first layer. And then the second layer. So this is also made using operator. This one actually uses a bit of FM. You can see we have a sine wave here. And then the second oscillator is also a sine wave. But then the second oscillator is an octave down. So we get that kind of darker thing happening. And then I've just low passed it just to make it a bit deeper. And then we just have some drum bus on that and a bit of compressor side chaining into the kick. And then on the group of all the low end here, we just have a bit of saturation. So yeah, you always want to do something like this to really make your low end solid in the track, because you really need that synergy between your kick and bass line. It can't just be a kick and bass line playing side by side. You really want to think of it in terms of the overall low end. And yeah, so I have the saturator here, and one really good tip that I picked up on is this bass knob down here. A lot of times, like, when you start to saturate, especially elements that have a lot of low end, like if I actually turn this drive up more, you start to get that kind of crunch, but if you turn the bass knob up, it kind of goes away a little bit. It's a lot more noticeable, like, you know, when you're just doing it down here. But basically, it's just a good way to still be able to get, like, a pretty heavy amount of drive without that, like, super crunchy sound. You're just going to get a bit of fatness rather than it actually, like, crunching the sound up. And yeah, then we have these chords. So yeah, as you can see, it's 3 different layers here. Some of these, like these two, only play one note every 2 bars, basically. So it's kind of like we have those two doing the call and response, and then we have this one that just kind of constantly jumps around. And then for the notes on these, so they're all basically just playing this D minor 7 chord. It's just a D minor. That's just a basic D minor chord. And then you add that minor 7th on top, which, to make it simple, see how when I put that down an octave, it's just 2 notes down from the root? There you go, that's how you find the minor 7th. But yeah, it's a very kind of like, you know, smooth and jazzy feel with that chord, like especially if I play this one. It really gives you that like deep jazzy house sort of feel. And these types of chords are really popular in the style of music. So the first sound is made using analog, and it's just a square wave and a saw wave. The square wave's an octave up, and the saw wave is detuned a little bit. And then those are just going into a low pass filter, which has a bit of resonance and the frequencies there. And then you can see we have the envelope set like that. So it's like this really short, like that, just like a quick plucky sound. And then we have the amp envelope like that. And then I just have a bit of unison, and that's it for inside the synth. And then after that, we actually just have a bit of chorus and a bit of reverb, just to give the sound a little bit more space. And then that's it for the first chord. And then with the second chord, so this one is doing this thing here where you can see it's just D minor the whole time, but then we're doing kind of like by playing with just the D minor and then adding the minor 7th on top. And then the chord down here is just D minor an octave down. But for the sound with this one, this is made with FM synthesis using operator. So what we have here is just 2 sine waves. And what I'm doing here is I have the second one an octave down from the first one. So it gives you this kind of more like deep feel versus if they're in the same octave. You know, it feels a bit more like rigid, but then you put it down an octave, and you get kind of a cool timbre happening there from the FM. And then that's just going into a bandpass. So here's without that. And then with it. You can see it's got a bit of an envelope on there. Then we just have a bit of chorus and some reverb. You can see it's a really short reverb as well. You don't want a really long one with this type of a stab since it's just happening so frequently. And then finally we just have some drum bus to beef it up. And then the last chord, it's just this one. And as you can see, this one's really simple. It doesn't even have any effects on it. It's just like a little sort of background sound, you know, like a little effect. Like that. So the way this is being made is just, it's a simple patch. You can see it's just 2 sine waves here inside of operator. This one, the second one, is actually an octave up rather than the first one being an octave up. And I've also got that detuned a little bit. And then it's going through a bandpass filter. And really the main secret with this one is just like the placement and the timing, because it has this huge this huge like attack envelope. So you get that like kind of like fades into the sound there. So you get a really cool thing when you go from the super bouncy chord. It's like boom, dip, boom. It kind of brings it back down again, you know? And that's something you really want to think about with these chord stabs. It's not just like each one sounding cool on its own, you know? This isn't just a tech demo, this is music. You need these to kind of like work together and do something interesting together, and so that's what that's doing there. And yeah, that is it for the chords. Then we have these hi-hats. So So the first thing we have here is this main hi-hat. Now, the main thing with this is you can hear, it's a pretty standard hi-hat sample, but you'll notice usually you wouldn't have like a shorter hi-hat like this on the upbeats. Usually you'd have like a longer, like, open hi-hat, like something like that. But by having this shorter, kind of faster sound, this really contributes to the sort of like micro house feeling. I think that's something you really need to pay attention to with this style, is like how long the drum samples are. And that's just going through a bit of drum bus and some EQ8 to cut out the low end. And then we have the shaker. Again, just like a sample that I took and shortened a bunch here. So again, just like a shorter hi-hat. We also have this closed hi-hat, which... So you can hear the layers here. The idea is that we have... I almost kind of view this like the way you would view like ad-libs if you were recording vocals. It's like you have the main one, like this will be your main vocal. Then you have the one that's going to be constantly following up every line. And then you have one which just kind of pops in and out. And this way, it just feels a lot more alive, and the groove feels more full. This is really what you want to think about. It's like, not necessarily just layering together a bunch of shakers that are all doing the but if you already have the shaker, then you can add in like a closed hi-hat like this. And it's all going to be contributing to the overall groove. And then the last hi-hat in here is this little noise effects patch, which sounds like this. So this is the one that you hear kind of bouncing around in the background. This one is even more sparse, so again, we're kind of splitting it across different layers based on how frequently they play. And what this one is actually, it's some white noise inside of operator here, you can see. And then we have it going into a high-pass filter with a ton of resonance. That's what's creating that sort of like tone. If we turn the resonance off. So we have that, and then what's happening is the filter frequency is being modulated with this sample and hold LFO here. So it's basically just a random LFO. But if I turn off this erosion here, you can hear. So that's the sound just coming out of the synth, and then we add erosion. And that's what creates the cool kind of percussive texture. So I definitely recommend doing something like this. If you listen to not just Toman's tracks, but a ton of these producers' tracks, there's these kind of sounds all over, just having some kind of percussion made with a synth, I think can really add life to your track, because it's never going to be the same thing twice because of this LFO. It's constantly changing, and it's just adding a very interesting texture to the overall track this way. And then I just have that going through a high pass and a bit of reverb. You can see the reverb's really short. And then on the group of hi-hats, we just have a bit of drum bass and an EQ. So here's without those. And then with them, so you can hear the drum bass really gives this makes it hit a lot. We get a lot of fatness in that main hi-hat. And everything just kind of comes together to a more even level sonically as well. And then the EQ here just cuts out the low end, just make sure that it's not going to get in the way of the bass. And then we get a little high end boost. And yeah, and then we have the percussion. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of percussion in here, and this is what I was talking about earlier in this video, is like, in this style, you're sort of like things that would be main elements in other tracks, like, like I said, the chord stabs, maybe if you have like a vocal sample, the melodies, all that kind of stuff, really isn't the main thing. The main thing with this style is the percussion, because it's all about how this is all moving off of each other. Even just like, how these are grooving together like on an even smaller level, like just those layers. But then how that's all coming together when you're hearing the whole big track. And yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff here. So the first thing would be like these two little percussions. You can hear just little. Just a bit of call and response between those two percussions. Then we have these hand drums. Almost like a timbale type of sound. And you know, that's just giving us like a constant, almost like a loop of something that's just constantly going and going in the background. Then we have like these extra little percussions here. Like when you're hearing the overall track, you are of course hearing all of this, and it's all like adding to what your brain is formulating about the track. But once I start to kind of like break these apart, you can see how they all come together in the track. And like this is a big thing. Like if you're having a hard time getting your tracks to really sound professional and on the same level as these tracks that these people make, a lot of times it might just be because you're missing, like, you know, if you don't have these two elements, the whole groove is going to be impacted. You can hear when I turn even those two minor background elements on, it already makes a big difference. And then we have the clap. You know, kind of a more like mid-rangey clap. Then we have these percussions. This little like bell. So those just hit on like the 2 and the 4. That gives you like a little... You know, having little stuff like that just goes on different random places with the clap can really help. And it's kind of the same thing that the bell's doing too. Then we have some bongos, which you can hear. Just kind of play a little bit more sparsely. They just sort of come there like... kind of a bit more slowed down groove. And then finally we have this clave. And that just goes... And yeah, so you can see like all this percussion is really going to come together and make the big picture. So this is what you want to keep in mind is like, you know, I won't say that there's no such thing as too much, but you really want to have a lot of stuff happening. And it's all about having like a lot of individual small sounds that on their own, you know, would probably not be the biggest thing, wouldn't stand out too much. But when you're putting them all together, that's what's really going to make the big picture here. And then on the group of percussion, you actually don't have anything. But you can see there's a lot of like individual processing on some of these. Like the clap has a bit of saturation. We've got a bit of drum bus on the bongos. So yeah, like, you know, the percussion's a little bit smaller in this style. You don't need as much super hard hitting stuff. Mainly you just want the hi-hats to hit really hard. And yeah, so that is going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Everybody who picks these sample packs up really helps to support me. I appreciate all the support you guys have been giving me lately. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. And I will see you tomorrow with another video.